I want to talk about protein because when people mention plant-based or vegan, the meat eaters get very excited about protein, especially the levels of protein we need as we age. Is this something you address with your nutritional advice?
Yes, I absolutely think that's very important, which I address because there are certain forms of a plant-based diet. Like some people will eat almost all fruit, like a fruitarian diet or a raw food diet. And I noticed those people do have some more immunosenescence as they age from lack of protein, because their diet is, and people putting too much oil on their food. You're taking, instead of nuts and seeds, when you take your fat with nuts and seeds, you're getting 10 grams of protein came along with the fat. When you put oil in your food, you just remove 10 grams of protein out of your diet. So I see the design of some plant-based diets can be low in protein. Keeping in mind out of these 5 categories of foods, the only one low in protein is fruit. The rest, the intact grain, the vegetables, the beans, and the nuts all have adequate protein. So in your diet, especially when you're eating some of the higher protein, which are the higher protein foods like greens, beans, right? Greens, beans, and nuts and seeds. Because the Nutritarian diet utilizes so much greens, beans, and nuts and seeds, it's relatively high as most and protein compared to other other plant-based diets. You know what I mean? And it's high in calcium too, for that matter. And it's not low in fat and it has adequate protein. So when we measure the protein, content of the diet, we're easily getting a gram per kilogram of body mass, and we're not on a very low protein or a very low fat diet. Mm-hmm. It's just a very natural protein and natural type of fat that humans can get without being toxic. Like the big concern today that most people don't even know about is the agricultural runoff causing algae overgrowth in the estuaries and lakes and coastal waterways that have now contaminated the bivalves. First of all, the sardines and the small fish are contaminated with microplastics in their digestive tract, and the bottom feeders like shellfish and bivalves, like clams, oysters, mussels, and scallops, have a high level of BMAA, which is now linked to ALS and Parkinson's dementia syndrome from eating seafood that's contaminated. And it's contaminated with the BMAA from cyanobacteria, which grow on algae from agricultural runoff and on the plastic dumping off the coastal waterways. Mm-hmm. So, whereas some seafood in the diet could have been a good source of zinc and DHA and B12, now it becomes a highly polluted source of those nutrients. So it makes more sense in the modern world to move your diet more plant-based as we've contaminated and polluted some of these animal foods that we could have had in smaller quantities that could have been healthy.
And do you find you need to change those levels of protein for younger people or for older people, or is it the same, like 1 gram per kilo throughout?
What you're saying is correct, that people in middle age, like 30s, 40s, and 50s, they can eat a diet mostly of fruit with a little bit of vegetables and beans and nuts. It could be they can get enough protein in a diet that's relatively low in protein because their protein bioavailability is so high. They digest the protein so effectively. But as we age, the quality of our digestion goes down and we aren't able to assimilate protein as well. And so a nutritarian diet is particularly well designed for a toddler, a growing toddler who needs more protein, or a person over the age of 80 who needs some extra protein as well. Most Americans don't have to worry about this because they're dead by then anyway. They die young and they don't have to really get to the point. But us nutritarians, we can use hemp seeds and edamame and soybeans and black beans and lentils and navy beans and artichokes and broccoli, as you know, are super high in protein. People don't realize these solid green vegetables that have substance, like when you steam an artichoke and eat the heart, or you eat broccoli florets, that's really high in protein, especially when you mix it in the meal with like nuts and seeds and you have some beans with it. Then you've got a really high protein meal and you don't have to get animal products to get that level of high protein quality.
What about omega oils? Is that something that you would supplement with, or would you get that through the diet as well?
Well, we're talking about, there's a lot of different omega-3 oils, but the three basic ones are ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, that comes from walnuts and flax seeds. And it's important to get a source of ALA in your diet because ALA itself, before it changes, by the body can convert it into EPA and the longer chain omega-3, EPA, and then eventually DHA, which is really important for the brain. But ALA by itself is still an important nutrient, irrespective of its being converted into EPA and DHA. And we get a lot of that in the nutritarian diet because half of our nut and seed intake comes from walnuts, flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds that are all very high in omega-3. And then we also additionally supplement with plant-based DHA and EPA to keep the omega-3 index above 5.5.
Mm-hmm.
Because on this plant-based diet, we know that we get shrinkage of the brain with aging, with low levels of omega-3 index, which can be protected against by eating seafood or fish oils. But we can use these algae oils, which I actually sell a refrigerated algae-based oil on my website, because all my patients and people who follow my approach, we get a refrigerated product that gives them some extra EPA and DHA to prevent the natural tendency towards brain shrinkage with aging. What I'm saying right now is everybody's brain shrinks with aging. It's part of aging, just like your bones. But we want to resist that from shrinking to maintain our full memory and intellectual abilities in our later years. So we resist that by taking the omega-3 supplements. However, not every single person in the world needs to take the supplement. Some people genetically can convert the ALA into EPA and DHA effectively enough to have a level above 5.5 without supplements. Mm-hmm. And some people need higher doses of the supplements because even with a normal dose, they don't convert enough. So how much you need to take is variable from person to person and should be directed by the blood test, the omega-3 index.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be a bell curve, isn't it? It's like most things. Some people are going to be on one end of the spectrum, others, and those are the ones that everyone likes to highlight as the case studies. But really, the general population is going to be pretty fine somewhere in the middle.
That's correct. Exactly correct.
Another concern I've heard people talk about is phytates and oxalates being quite high in raw foods.
Right.
Is that something that how do you address that?
The Nutritarian diet. Now, I do give people advice about how to eat and how to make the diet ideal for them. And we do not advise people to have salads of spinach and Swiss chard, and which are highest in oxalates, and even parsley. Well, I don't need a lot of parsley. So in other words, that's why we're using foods like bok choy and kale and arugula as a source of omega-3. And bok choy has the biggest calcium oxalate, a favorable calcium oxalate ratio. In other words, low oxalates, high calcium. Oxalates bind calcium. Spinach has a lot of calcium, but also high in oxalates. The oxalates bind the calcium, making it not bioavailable. And so oxalates also produce more calcium in the urine as well. As you excrete the oxalates, you take more calcium in the urine that could pool and cause stones in some susceptible people. So we're recommending people not eat more than 25% of their raw vegetable intake from spinach. We limit that to 25%. And also we utilize, and we want the salad to contain a lot of lettuce. Lettuce almost has zero oxalates in it. It's really low oxalate food, and it's a rich source of calcium. And lettuce is a superfood, by the way, because lettuce itself is nature's richest source of sulfoquinavose, which is the favored fuel for the healthy bacteria to grow in your gut and to create that healthy biofilm on the villi, the healthy bacteria coating. So we're talking here about mixing the right foods together. And even though some oxalates are completely normal and actually healthy for us, we don't want to have an excessive amount. So we do watch spinach, parsley, rhubarb, Swiss chard, or we don't want to overdo those high oxalate foods, but we don't have to be concerned about the whole vegetable and plant kingdom because it has oxalates in it. We just don't want to go overboard on those. You know what I mean?
And
the same
phytates.
The phytates themselves have bone strengthening and other anti-cancer benefits, though they bind zinc. And zinc is a critical nutrient. So even though to protect immunosenescence and brain, and also for the brain as we age. And we're saying here that if our risk of death as we age, if it's not going to be from cancer or heart disease, then what we're going to die of, and another cause of death could be infection like pneumonia, right? Sepsis. And zinc, so zinc supplementation to account for the lower absorption of zinc from a plant-based diet because of the presence of phytates compared to the more readily and easily absorption of zinc from animal products. We don't just supplement with B12 as a nutrient that's not the ideal level on a plant-based diet. It's also probably not optimal level of zinc as well. So zinc, B12, and DHA, EPA are probably the three most critical nutrients to supplement with, even though we're still checking a few other things, but those are the main three that you're not going to have idealized levels on a plant-based diet. Probably not.